everyone. Our guest today is Cliff Simon, CRO at Carabiner Group, which is part of the SBI Growth Group. Cliff brings nearly 20 years of expertise in go to market strategies and RevOps, working with both Fortune 50, Fortune 20 companies, and high growth startups. He's a pro at scaling RevOps, aligning teams, driving ARR. In 2024, Cliff was recognized as a HubSpot modern sales leader and named one of Pavilion's top 50 CROs to watch. Cliff, thank you so much for joining us today, Brand.
Thanks for having me, Karen. How you doing?
Doing great. Happy New Year.
Are we allowed to still say that?
Yeah, it's still first 2 weeks. It's legit. Today's the last day.
Yeah. Happy New Year, man. Happy New
Yeah.
Year.
So, jumping right in, Cliff, can you walk us through your career journey and how your experience in both like Fortune 20, Fortune 50 companies and startups have shaped your approach towards modern RevOps and GTM?
Yeah, so I mean, early in my career, I started working for Verizon, right? And I think what was really beneficial about that was seeing all the ways that you do things from a process perspective, both from a sales mechanism, a commercial mechanism, legal, financial, within a company of that size. I think that was really formative for me to be able to see all of those gears working inside of the machine. And then throughout my career, I went from this 90,000 person company to a 30,000 person company to 3,000 to 300 to 35 to being the third employee at Carabiner. And yeah, along the way, you just get to see so many different facets of how go-to-market gets done in B2B, B2C, D2C. So I don't know, I feel like that's given me a fairly wide purview. And because of that, I've been able to say, okay, hey, these pieces worked really well over here. Let's bring that to this particular use case and, um, you know, build that best in class for the fit versus the cookie cutter model that I think a lot of people have gone for in the past.
Got it. And if someone was to ask you, right, like just 7-year-old saying, "Hey, I heard about sales, I heard about marketing, sales ops, marketing ops. What is RevOps? Like, where is this term coming from? What does RevOps do?"
RevOps is the thing that makes everything connect and actually work, right?
Right.
You have all these pieces of go to market, and that's great, but RevOps is the track that it all runs on.
Got it. So, like, let's say you're brought in as a fractional CRO or RevOps consultant or both. What is going to be the process? How are you going to come in? What are you going to look at? Who are you going to talk to? Like, what will be that first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, you have to start with a diagnostic of where things are today. You have to have a really good conversation with the ETL. You have to have really good conversations with everyone up and down the line in every department. And then you have to get in front of as many customers as you can to find out what their sentiment and feedback is of the product or the solution and how that's actually affecting their ability to get value out of it. So take a look at those pieces, then go back and look at the processes, find out what it is that people are actually doing in the day-to-day life. Don't just assume. Look at the systems, look at the technology. How is the data flowing? How has that been architected? And then ultimately, like, can you get data and insights out of that in a way that gives you something that's actionable to work off of to control and to make adjustments to the business?
Interesting. Any examples? I'm
I'm,
sure there are hundreds, but
I
like
mean,
just
yeah, we do audits like every other week.
right.
So yeah, too many to name, but some of the interesting ones that we've seen, some older legacy companies, right? There's processes that sort of just got translated into the 21st century that never should have been. Right? There's a process for this large company, and it was costing them a lot of time. It was actually adding, I don't know, probably like 25 to 30 days to their sales cycle.
And what was that? Like, can you name not the company, but just the process?
Yeah, so it was a transfer from a legacy process that when we went back and actually had the conversations, they used to have to fax a piece of paper to somebody and it would sit in this inbox, right? Well, inbox, right? It would be a fax machine. They would pick up the piece of paper, someone would log this thing manually and then push it into the next part of the process. You didn't have to fax that anymore, but it was being sent to an inbox and people weren't picking it up for days. And then like when they do a bulk upload of all this stuff at the end of the month, like, oh wait, that's like a broken part of the process. all because it was transitioned over from this legacy thing of they used to have a fax machine that they sent this thing to just for record keeping purposes, right? It wasn't even necessary. And now, with technology, you could have that automatically upload. You don't even need to have that be a holdup in the process. So just silly things like that where it wasn't ever critically evaluated as they went from a manual process to a digital one.
Right. Right. And then what did you guys like? So you come, you do the audit, you find like hundreds of gaps, and then you will suggest tools to automate those things and plug those gaps. Is that what RevOps is?
I mean, I think that's a very simplistic view of it. And sometimes tools are the right thing, and many times tools aren't. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of people said, "Oh, I'm going to buy this piece of tech. It's going to solve all my problems." Like, well, is it really? Have you figured out the process, and have you been able to replicate the outcome manually first? If you can get it done manually and you understand what's going on in an experiment, then you can put together the thesis of, okay, maybe this technology is going to save us X amount of time or allow us to do X amount more. And if those numbers make sense, then yeah, go ahead, buy the tech. But what is the cost of ownership of that technology? Who's going to own the technology? How does that change over time? Because now you're adding complexity. And then, I think about AI, and not to make everything about it, but if every tool is inserting some type of AI capability, how do you drive AI governance and make sure that all your AI is actually working together? So
Right.
you're adding another level of complexity and vulnerability to your stack.
Right. And so, Cliff, the example you shared was pretty interesting. Like, fax machines, you get still using those. Other examples like this is super interesting. If we can just spend the next 20 minutes hearing about different examples of your learnings, like, hey, this is what these guys were doing before, and this is what we transitioned to after, and what was the result?
I mean, like we do a lot of work in legacy industries too, right? I think SaaS tends to be on the forefront where many of us are on the other side of the chasm. We're already trying out things that other people haven't even thought of as like a reality, right? We do so much work in the financial services space or manufacturing space where people have no idea about the level of capability of technology. And they're
Mhm.
like, I feel like it's almost like going back to the Stone Ages, like I've got a lighter, right? Like this seems so basic to us. But we were working with this bank out of San Francisco actually, and built an entire process using technology to automate the way in which they were ingesting loan information. So think about it, right? You go get a mortgage or you're going a private loan. This happened to be a B2B loan. Um, all of that documentation that you would typically go through from a loan document perspective, right? Taxes, filings, bank statements, whatever, right? All of that was being sent into an inbox. Someone would have to open up the emails in those inbox, take those files, rename the files, build out the loan file inside of Salesforce, assign it to a loan officer. We automated that entire process using a couple key tools, Box, Salesforce, and FormStack. And now you, as the loan applicant, upload all the files. It automatically gets added into Salesforce, appropriately renames all the files, ties them all into Box. So it's all a secure file storage system, right? Write once, read many, FINRA compliant. And now you're saving this buttload of time. I think they end up saving like 2,000 hours a year just in the way that somebody would um, manage those files prior to a loan officer ever looking at them for the underwriting process.
Right. So you're basically like doing a detailed diagnostic on the entire sales process, right from like how do you qualify, how do you reach out, like do you do the entire qualified pipeline as well?
Yeah, we would look at everything from not just the qualified pipeline, but like, are you even targeting the right people, right?
Yep, ICP.
Do you have the right ACP? Are you going after the right TAM? Have you adjusted your positioning and messaging appropriately for those portions of your customer base? Are you breaking that up by persona? If you're doing those things, great. Let's make sure we're gathering that information. We're tracking those conversions and understanding what it really means to help a customer walk through that journey, right? Meeting them where they're at. Some people are in stage one, some people are in stage five, right? How do you make sure that you're giving the right messaging and the right information to the people at the right moment in time? Um, but from there all the way through a sales process, right? Because that selling process has to mirror your customer's journey, um, and then all the way through to revenue recognition, right? Where we're running businesses here,
Right.
so having gap accrual based modeling is great. We have to understand bookings, of course, but we also have to understand cash on hand and what's actually hitting the bank account. How can we make sure that the things that we've said we've signed in contracts are actually coming through, and that revenue is actually being received, not just recognized?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And super interesting points out here. So, question, right? Like when you talk about ICP, people have this notion that, hey, when you're in the 0 to 1 phase, that's when you're figuring out your ICP. Uh, have you seen a lot of like scale companies also struggle with ICP? And then if yes, then how do they solve that?
Yeah, it's incredible actually, and I would say even beyond scale, right? At SBI, we're working with companies, 100 million to multi-billion, right? Private equity backed. And I think very often you get tunnel vision as to we're really good in this sector, or we've said, um, we want to do the enterprise, or we were enterprise and now we're trying to move down market. Either way, you go with that particular motion. Have you actually done the work of identifying the right personas at each market segment? Because they might have the same title, but their behavior is wildly different,
Hmm?
right? The level of capability and authority that a VP of sales has at a $900 million company or a $3 billion company versus a $25 million company is very different.
Right. Right. No, and so you understand the authority, but like how do you then drive some of these larger organizations towards a better ICP? Like what's that process like? Like you come in into a company which is 500 million to $1 billion in revenue,
Yep.
right? Annual revenue. And so and you have to do this audit, you have to help them with the ICP. What will be that process like?
So it's a multifaceted process, right? We're going to come in. On one hand, we have a ton of benchmark data, right? Company name sales benchmark index should. And we're going to go back and look at that company and see how they're performing both against their similar peers as well as the companies that they aspirationally look to become like. How are you measured up from a rule of 40 perspective? How are you measured up from a sales effectiveness and capability perspective? And we do that by doing diagnostic, self-assessment of about 7 or 8 different personas within the sales organization.
Right.
So do you have the right people in the right role doing the right thing? So that's the execution piece. And on the
Right.
other side, it's what's that customer journey look like? How do those customers actually purchase from you? So going back, looking at the data, having qualitative conversations around that customer journey, doing customer interviews, going back and either doing that ourselves or going through third parties who will go and get that commercial information for us. Um, and then stitching that all together to say, hey, this is actually what your customer journey looks like. These are the moments that matter. Um, yeah,
Awesome.
it's a fun process. It probably takes us something like 6 to 10 weeks to be able to pump that out.
Got it. Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, as a company scales, right, what are the most common mistakes you have seen based on all your years of experience and doing it for hundreds of customers? What are the most common mistakes you see when they expand their DevOps teams, particularly in the context of driving ARR from like
Yeah.
startup scale ups?
So what I would say is the biggest mistake is usually a function of really good product market fit. The product market fit drives the company, and the go to market teams continue to grow at scale because that's what you do, right? You've got gap in the market, people are buying, you add more capacity, you keep moving. The the problem that ends up driving is when times are good, as they were for the last however many years, people would come in and just continue to scale out the go-to-market teams
Right.
while the operational side of the house would suffer. And you wouldn't have the appropriate ratio, right? So early stage companies, it's usually something like a 1 to 20, right? As you get larger, 1 to 17, 1 to 15, 1 to 14, 1 to 13, right? And what we see very often is companies are like in a 1 to 30, 1 to 35, right? And what happens when you've got a disproportionate amount of team on the go to market side versus the operational side of the house is that those operational folks are firefighting all day long. They don't have the time or the capacity to be able to focus on strategic initiatives, which means that you're never actually building out the infrastructure that you need in order to support the additional go-to-market motions that are required in order to get you to the next phase. And at that point in time, you've got however many PE sponsors that you've gone through, and you're looking to get that 3 to 5x, but it's very difficult to come by, and you have to invest in RevOps. Right. Our CEO, Mike Hoffman, was at a PEI forum back in October, leading a panel. I think it was like 3 or 4 different value creation and operating partners from some very well-known private equity firms. And his question to them was, if you could give one piece of advice to your portfolio companies in order to drive the value equity within their organizations, what would it be? And unanimously across the board, the answer was invest in RevOps early and often. Right? If you're no longer looking at it as a cost center, but the means by which you can unlock your ability to go from 1 to 2 or 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 billion, that's really powerful, right? And when the people who are giving you the money are the ones telling you to do it, like maybe you should actually listen. And for our friends that are down market, getting ahead of it and making sure that you have the appropriate systems and processes and data collection points early make your life so much easier as you continue to work your way up from being a 10 million to 25 million to $100 million company.
Wow. And so if you were to like tell people or suggest people, right? Like when does RevOps start becoming a priority? Like, is it the 1 to 5 scale, 5 to 10, 10 to 50 million in ARR? Like when does RevOps starts? Like when should you start focusing on RevOps? How early
Immediate,
is it,
immediately.
right? And then how do people go about it? Like how do they do that? Do they get a person in? Do they like because obviously consulting firms could be expensive. So how do you do that?
Sure. So I think what might be helpful is just to talk about the way that we did it for ourselves, right? Yes, we're a RevOps consulting firm, but um, we weren't always. We started off just being a Salesforce shop.
Okay.
And when we first came into business and I joined up, we didn't have a CRM yet, right? We were a few months in, we are running everything off of Excel. We did it manually first to make sure that we had our processes and we understood what we were doing. And then we built on Salesforce because we knew that someday if we wanted to be acquired, most likely our acquirer would be on Salesforce, not on HubSpot, just based off of the folks that we were going to be going after,
Okay.
who would most likely be interested in a company like ours. And we built out all of the necessary data capture places within Salesforce so that we could capture sales velocity across each stage, so we could understand lead to contact conversion and what that timeline looked like. And that way we could track all of our appropriate lead sourcing, so we knew where to put our time and effort from a cost perspective and from an opportunity cost perspective. We thought about the outcome before we actually built the system. And maybe that was a luxury, or maybe we were just, uh, I don't want to say lucky, but I think we were very intentful on like um, how we thought about building out our systems. And because of that, it made our lives that much easier when we went through an acquisition over the summer. So
Right. And now
do it
question on
from the
that.
beginning. Yeah,
So like there are like if you get the diagnostic wrong or you go to someone who really does not have much of an idea and they set it up, they can also screw it up really bad. So how do you ensure that you're actually getting the right systems in place? Like they're good folks and they're not so great folks in terms of like the knowledge. How do you identify like, hey, these are the people I need to work with to make sure that I'm getting the most efficient system set up for my company?
I think you have to ask some really good and hard questions, right? Treat it like an interview. RevOps is the lifeblood of your company. So the people that are helping you there, whether they're external or internal hires, you need to have full faith and confidence that they know what they're doing and that they have the capability that you're looking for. Um, yeah, it's such a vital piece of an organization. It, if I'm explaining to my kids who are, all under 5, you've got bones and you've got, um, skin that's sort of holding it all together, but RevOps is all the muscle that makes everything work underneath, right? Like it's the ligaments, it's the tendons that ties and binds and allows things to actually happen. So
So,
it's an integral part of your business.
so if you're advising a startup, right, let's say, and they're like saying, "Hey, Cliff, help us either build a RevOps thing," and you're like, "Hey, man, I'm too busy right now, don't have the time," and then they'll be like, "Okay, great. So tell us who should we go to, what should we do, what should we ask to identify the right people?" What would that list be like?
Man, probably the same questions that I'd be asking them, like, what is your plan to run this company, right? Where are you trying to go? Um, what are your do you have a customer journey mapped out today? Yes or no? All right, let's start there. Once you've got that figured out, what's your go-to-market motion?
Right.
How do we actually communicate this to customers and how do we track that data? Um, we can you can do it very simply in the beginning. Like I said, you can run off a spreadsheet if you're very early days and you don't need to go spend the money on a system. The system allows you to just unlock and accelerate the processes that you've already done manually. All right. But if you have bad processes and you go and bolt on another piece of automation, then you're just automating crap. And then you're going to be for a world of hurt. So,
Right, right. And like when you're saying like go to market motion and reaching out, like LinkedIn is becoming a popular channel.
oh, yeah.
And so, how does RevOps play a role with becoming a brand on LinkedIn, becoming a thought leader? Like, does RevOps play a role there? And then, like, using that for generating qualified pipeline,
Does RevOps? I feel it's sort of a gray area.
right?
Um,
I'm
LinkedIn doesn't
curious
like,
because
well, yeah, LinkedIn doesn't like bots, right? I think everyone that's on LinkedIn today, and there's a ton of content creators out there, but the content creators are by and large like a very small minority of the people that are on LinkedIn. Most LinkedIn users aren't super active, right?
right.
Um, and LinkedIn also locks down their API like crazy, right? So I think it's really difficult to have it as part of like a RevOps um, capability on LinkedIn.
Right.
Um, I think there's some baseline things that you can do, but other than that, I don't know. I'm very personally very wary of any automation on LinkedIn. I've seen it go bad many times, um, but that's just me. Maybe I'm overly cautious, and I don't ever want to end up in LinkedIn jail.
Got it. What about like, you highlighted the importance of community-led growth in your work, right? Like, how can RevOps teams leverage community building strategies to strengthen their go-to-market motion and drive growth?
I love the community aspect, right? Both for what it's done for us as a firm and what it's done for me personally. If you can curate a very small and passionate group of people who care about your product and want to be able to learn from each other, I think that's a great place to start. I don't think community has to be this huge end all be all where everything is in there, right? It could be a very small, tight knit community of your most um, experienced and or most passionate users. Go for it. Start small, start manual, make it a Slack channel, right? Make it a Google group. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Get people together, let them talk, let them share ideas and stories, let them learn from each other, and you create the value for them that way.
Interesting. That's useful. And for you, Cliff, personally, right? Like you've been doing this for like a long period of time now, right? What are the things you are excited about getting into 2025? Like, what are the things you're going to be like? Hey, I want to learn these things. These are the new things. Obviously, mostly probably dominated by a lot of AI work. But like, what are you excited about? What are you saying? Hey, these are the things which I think will change in the RevOps world in 25.
Hmm. There's a lot of folks coming out with RevOps agents.
Right?
Everyone's switched their Copilot and every other piece of technology into some type of agentic this year.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious to see the level of capability. And again, a lot of companies are going to try to automate a ton of things, but maybe those aren't the right things to be automating. So I'm curious to see how those sort of two worlds collide. Um, I'm also doing a project for a large VC right now, VCP, they're both, um, on, I think we just upped it. So we're looking at 20 AI, SDR, and CSM tools, evaluating them for capability. So I'm excited about that one. But we should get that finished in the next month or so here. Um, Maybe a little longer, gosh, 2 months. And we'll put out some research around it, which will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. Mostly because I want to see what's going on in the market, right? One of the things I've really enjoyed about my role here at Carabiner is that I've had the opportunity to test, push buttons on, try to break dozens, if not hundreds, of pieces of tech over the last 4 years that I've been at Carabiner. So
Yeah.
um, it's one of the things I definitely enjoy the most, tinkering and figuring out what is working and what does have that upside potential versus the things that our customers are actually using today.
Right. And kind of that leads to the next point, which is like the key traits or skills you're looking for in a potential hire on the RevOps side, and especially in high growth environments, would be the same thing like tinkering and just the love for breaking products, solving for client pain.
Maybe. I think it really depends on the role,
Okay.
right? Um, if I'm looking, and the roles largely going to depend on the people that are already inside the organization, their level of capability, right? If I already have that tinkerer, that person that's driving the experimentation for us as an organization internally, I probably don't need to hire for that role. The person I probably want to hire for in most cases is going to be some type of BI capability, a business analyst, who can help either bridge the gap between the data and finance side of the house. That's usually a role that's very valuable. Um, I feel like the system admin role is probably the one that I'm going to hire for the least. Even if I was building a company today, I would probably outsource that. I can just get way more capability from an outsourced shop than I could from a internal hire.
Sure.
um, Pound per dollar, right? I'm not going to go pay somebody $80,000 a year when I can go get it for 70 something K, not have to pay taxes or health benefits on top of that, and get someone that's got 3 to 5 years of experience versus someone who's coming pretty fresh out of school.
Yeah.
Um, the architecture side might be the place that I hire to, right? Someone that's got not just Salesforce or HubSpot or Dynamics capability, but someone who understands data flow and how that data maneuvers alongside the processes so that they can help us build out and plan that more advanced capability as we are looking to grow and scale a company. That's probably the hire I'd make the most. Someone that's a bit more technical across, a litany of systems, right? A true polyglot.
So what are the best resources for people to learn about RevOps? Like if someone wants to do a course on RevOps or like study about like what are these different things, what are the different architectures, like what are the best resources?
Ooh, I think that's so difficult because when you're talking about the architect level RevOps, not just the strategic thinking, but actually like how you stitch systems together,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of stuff out there, right? You probably need to have some type of Salesforce and or HubSpot architect cert, right? You should already have, no, let's just use Salesforce as the baseline, right? Um, you're probably already platform app builder. You're probably already admin and or sales consultant, right? Um, Sales Cloud consultant certified. You're probably going to go for architect next, and then beyond that, you're probably certified on a multitude of systems, including um, ETL, some type of automation flow. You're probably you probably know SQL, right? Those people are not a dime a dozen anymore because most people are really good at one thing. I find it very difficult to find people who can grab the entire capability of technology and also have um, the go-to-market prowess to be able to understand the reasoning as to why you're building out the systems the way you are. So you take that from a technical perspective and then marry that against something like Winning by Design's revenue growth architecture course, right? I think you put those two things together, um, that's probably a really good foundational marriage for a RevOps like architect, RevOps consultant, um, who can come in and actually run the data side of the house.
I have so many more questions, Chris, but we are on time, Cliff.
Already? Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, and just last thing, right? Like, obviously, want to bring this in. HubSpot, modern sales leader, top 50 CRO to watch remarkable achievements. What motivates you, and how do you stay inspired in this super competitive space?
It's funny. I learned a long time ago that money doesn't motivate me. What motivates me is actually solving problems. I like the strategy side of things. I really like seeing how different things can be connected and how you can solve a problem. I think that's one of the things I love about being a consultant is that I get to see dozens of problems every week, and that's what gets me going. That's what keeps me working like I don't know, way too many hours. Um, that and I love building, right? I'm a woodworker, and my part, when I'm not doing this stuff, and being able to see the fruits of labor over time is something that I find very satisfying. So
And I know that you did took like some ridiculous 50 to 100 flights in a year. Uh,
that I mean, I don't know. Seamus flies way more than I do, so I can't even talk.
right, but like, what's the secret of like getting over jet lag and like just being fresh? Like, any tips on that?
Um, I always act like I'm in the time zone that I'm landing in.
Right.
So if I'm getting up at 3 in the morning to get on a 6 a.m. flight to go to San Francisco for the day, I land in San Francisco and I treat it like I land at 9 a.m. It's 9 a.m. Right. Same thing. I'm originally from the Netherlands, so when I go back there, we land, do the whole day like you would do a normal day, and I think that's the best way to sort of keep your body in check is to just be in the circadian rhythm of the sun wherever you are.
Yep. Hey, man. Thank you so much. It seems like there needs to be another session because there's so much more to cover. But lovely having you today.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Cheers.